Welcome to the podcast about stories from the center of the universe. I'm Daniel Lance.
I'm Paul Gilman, and this is Podso 1.
Our next guest is Vincent Hill, a veteran, former police officer, author, and now a news anchor serving Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was born in Germany to a military family, grew up moving around a lot, and then joined the military himself. He spent 4 years in the Nashville Police Department after leaving the military, and later spoke out in criticism of the police's narrative of the Tennessee Titan quarterback Steve McNair's homicide case. He ended up writing a book about the whole thing called Playbook to a Murder. In our conversation, Vincent tells us all about his upbringing, his police experience, his reaction to the social upheaval of 2020 from the perspective of a black former police officer, his unique and varied career path, and everything in between. So here is Vincent Hill.
Vincent Hill, welcome to Podso 1.
Hey, Daniel, how are you, sir?
Doing great, man. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, excited to have Vincent on. Vincent is a man of many talents, and I have a feeling he has a couple stories he could share with us.
It's all fake. I'm going to tell you that.
No. It is all legit, 100% factual. Guarantee it. Cool. Well, Vincent, you've lived all over the place, but you trace your roots back to Columbia, South Carolina, right?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. My dad was Army. So he did 30 years. He got drafted to Vietnam. Luckily, he stayed in because otherwise I would be like a few of my cousins still in Tallahassee, Florida, which is where my folks are originally from. But I was born in Heidelberg, Germany. And, from there, just hopped all over the place. I think I lost count of how many states I've been in once I got to 10. My dad eventually got stationed at Fort Jackson back in the 80s. I want to say 85. So I went to middle school, part of high school there. We moved away to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I graduated. Then we moved back to Columbia, South Carolina in 92. So my folks are still there. My dad retired at Fort Jackson in 1995, the year after I joined the Army. So man, I've been all over the place. So
you were a hardcore brat for a lot of your childhood.
Oh yeah, I mean the typical Army brat. Like every 3 years you're on the go. Different high school, different friends. But the cool part of doing that is you get to meet people from all walks of life. Which again, I have cousins that have never literally left Tallahassee, Florida, and that's just a way of life I don't understand at all.
Yeah, it seems crazy not to leave, but I guess if you're not pulled to another place or you're not pushed to another place, I guess you stay where you are.
Yeah.
Your cousins are not alone. There are a lot of folks like that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I said Columbia, you could trace your roots back, but that sounds like middle school. First time you
yeah, I want to say it was. Let's see, I went to Dent Middle School, so it's maybe. No, it was a little before that. It was more probably 84. So whatever grade I was in 1984, when I was 11 years old, whatever grade you're in at 11, I'm getting up there in years. So.
Well, that's where your parents are now. So you call it home, I guess.
Oh yeah, for sure. They've been there the last 30 plus years. So yeah, it's definitely home.
Yeah, it's funny. Go ahead, Daniel.
Did you stop moving around after 10 years and then you stayed there for like your later years, or were you moving around all the way up through your high school?
Freshman and sophomore year was in South Carolina. Then we moved to Milwaukee, moved back to South Carolina. And then when I joined the military, started in Fort Drum, New York, 10th Mountain Division. Ironically, went back to Fort Jackson. I was stationed at Jackson and then out to California. So I moved pretty much my childhood and a good chunk of my adult life as well.
Right, yeah, so let's go back to your childhood real quickly. So out of all the places you lived, from birth to include Heidelberg, through graduating high school, what was your favorite place?
Wow. It would be a toss-up between Columbia and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee was cool. It was a culture shock, going into my junior year of high school. The only thing I'd ever heard of Milwaukee was like Happy Days. So, I pictured like the Fonz and, Richie. And I honestly thought moving up there that I was going to be the only black kid. Like I had no clue because I didn't see any black people on Happy Days. Right.
I'm fairly worldly. I wouldn't expect to see a lot of black kids in Milwaukee either.
So True story, funny story. The first day we get up there, the outgoing first sergeant is showing us around, and we're going to look at places to live, and we turn down what's called Locust Street, and anyone from Milwaukee knows Locust, and it's not the best part of town. And there's like a gang fight in the middle of the bridge. And the first sergeant looks at me. He says, "Well, is that enough black people for you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think that'll do. Like, I'm good." Yeah. So, but I thought for sure I was going to be the only black kid in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So, yeah.
Oh man, was the outgoing first sergeant white or black?
He was black. Yeah, he was
okay.
black. Yeah, but it was funny. I said, "I don't want to be here. There's not going to be any black people here." You know? So he's like, "Is that enough black people for you?"
That's hilarious. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man, beautiful. So I will tell you, I've never been to Columbia. I've heard lots of good things about it. I've been to Milwaukee, but I don't know. It's kind of this Midwest place. It's cold a lot.
Yeah, it's cold. Yeah.
It's definitely cold. I met somebody from Madison, Wisconsin. They also happens to be black, and I'm like, were there like 3 of you up there in Madison?
Yeah, in Madison, yeah, that's about it. 4 or 5. You know?
Maybe on a good day.
Yeah.
All right. So you joined the Army and you went to 10th Mountain. So you clearly, you enlisted in the Army, so you didn't really have a choice where you landed, right?
Yeah. Right.
So you go to 10th Mountain, and it's probably the coldest place in New York.
Yes. So it's funny, I get my orders, and it says Fort Drum, New York. I'm like, great. 21 years old, 22. I'm like, New York, yes, let's go. And they're like, no, it's not that New York. Yeah.
Drive 8 hours to the north and west, and you're good.
Yeah. So I get there, and because I drove up from South Carolina, I get there in September, and first thing I hear is, "Well, don't even unpack your shit because you're probably going to deploy soon." And then they say, "Well, in the next month it'll be snow, and it'll snow for at least the next 5 or 6 months." I'm like, "Nah, no way. But when I tell you cold, anytime you send your troops from Fort Wainwright, Alaska to Fort Drum to do cold weather training, that tells you how cold it is. Like 40 below type cold.
Wow, they sent people from Alaska to Drum.
Yep, to do cold weather training. Yep.
Oh, that is brutal.
That's brutal. Yeah.
Well, that's where the Army sent everybody, right, for cold weather training.
And literally the last year I was there, it would have been 97. It snowed on Mother's Day, and Mother's Day is in May. And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. I got to get out of here. Like, I got to go. Like, why is it snowing in May? Yeah. And it wasn't just like a little dusting. No, it was full on blizzard type snow.
That's crazy. It makes you wonder why people live there.
Yeah. Yeah. And Watertown, at least back then, I'm sure now, because no one wants to live there unless you're in the military or you're like an ex-spouse of the military or something like that. Nobody lives in Watertown, New York,
Watertown exists because the Army picked a place to do cold weather stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for Fort Drum, that place it would not exist. Just like any other city with the Army base around.
95% of them anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was your job in the military, in the Army?
So I started 92 Yankee unit supply, moved over to 97 Bravo counter intel. There was a point where I wanted to do CID, because I'm an investigator by nature, but that never really panned out. And I think it probably worked out for the best anyway.
What's CID?
Criminal Investigation Division.
I'll help him out, Vincent. Think NCIS, but for the Army.
Yeah, there you go.
Is NCIS for the Navy?
Oh my gosh! Do you not know that there's a show that's been on for like 20 years?
Well, I know about NCIS. I just never knew what it stood for.
It's for the Navy, but I started doing my paperwork for CID, and I can't remember exactly what happened, but it wasn't meant to be. There was actually at one point I thought I was going to fly helicopters and took the AFAS test, and I literally failed it by 3 points. So I said, well, I guess it's not meant for me to fly helicopters. That was a kick in the butt to fail it by 3 points, but again, it wasn't meant to be. So.
Could you retake it?
Yeah, but I just took it as a sign. I mean, if I was that close, 3 points,
And didn't get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just took it as a sign. So
What do you want to talk about more, 92 Yankee or 97 Bravo? 97 Bravo, you probably can't talk a whole lot about.
probably not. Yeah, let's just say you get to see some stuff. That's for sure.
Well, you can describe it at a high level what counter intel does without giving away any U.S. military secrets.
Yeah, I would just say, I guess the brunt of it is we look for people, I guess you could say. I don't want to use the word spy, that's such an overrated.
That's clearly not what you're doing. Sure.
Yeah, and it's such an overrated word, but when people hear counterintelligence, they're like, oh my God, were you like wearing a beard and like were you undercover? I'm like, yeah, I was, but not in that life. That was a different life where I was undercover. So, and 92 Yankees it's fun in its own right, because what's that old saying? There's two people you don't mess with: the supply person and the cook. You know what I mean?
I never mess with the supply guy. Never.
Yeah. The supply person or the cook, like, oh, you need pillows, do you? Nope. So
not today.
Yeah, not today. But yeah, I mean, overall, the Army, and you've been in the military, Paul. It's a life that you probably wouldn't get otherwise. You get to see a lot of cool places. Well, sometimes they're not cool when you're seeing them, but the experience of being in the military is probably unmatched by anything.
Yeah, the camaraderie is awesome. The getting to see new places, being around people with different experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, an old buddy of mine I hadn't seen since 96, 97 at Fort Drum hit me up on Twitter a couple of months ago. I'm like, oh my God, you found me, So it's that brotherhood that you just don't get anywhere else.
Yeah, they're guys I can call up today. I haven't seen in 20 years, and yeah, they'll take my call and we'll reminisce and talk about whatever. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's I think it's mostly unmatched by most other endeavors.
Yeah, besides police department.
Yeah. I wouldn't know. All right, well, let's talk about. Well, let's back up. How long were you in the Army?
Right at 8 years. Let's see. 94 to 02. So isn't that like 8 years? I think it's 8 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you deploy overseas?
I had a Haitian vacation once.
Yeah. Well, tell us quickly about what that was all about.
Boy. So, Fort Drum, it's a rapid deployment unit. Actually, when I got there, they literally had just come back from Somalia, and the movie Black Hawk Down.
Oh yeah, it's a good movie.
And they sent the 10th Mountain Division in there to get those boys out. We had just gotten back from Somalia when I got there, and I think Haiti may have been September, around November-ish of that year when I got there. So went to Haiti. It was very hot. Not the most favorable living conditions, but it is what it is. You're there to keep the peace, per se. So when I always tell people, yeah, I had a Haitian vacation, they're like, oh wow, how was it? Yeah, it wasn't the best. But you were in Haiti too, right? Or was that Gene that was in Haiti?
I never was in Haiti. Gene probably.
I think it was Gene, because I remember Gene and I talking about it once. But
Gene's been everywhere at least once. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he used to fly. So.
And by the way, just for our listeners who've been listening for a long time, Gene is episode 7.
Yes.
Gene Burke.
Gene Burke.
Yes. Very cool. So how long was your vacation in Haiti?
About 3 months.
Yeah. Long enough.
Long enough. Yeah. Long enough to say I'm ready to go home. And,
right.
I definitely don't want to name names or throw anybody under the bus, but there were some guys doing stuff over there where you're like, all right, man, like if your stuff falls off, don't say anything.
Man. Yeah, we said a lot of positive things about being in the Army. There's some not so positive things about being in the Army as well.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So you got out of the Army. Where'd you go to next?
Yeah. So I got out of the Army. It's funny. September 11th had happened. I was about to reenlist for 6 years, Ramstein, Germany, $50,000 reenlistment bonus. And September 11th happened, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall. It's like, September 11th. I don't know if I want this in my future. You know what I mean? Because I would have been in Germany, or my wife at the time and my son would have been in Germany, but I would have been deployed and doing all kind of crazy stuff. So my ex-wife at the time, her dad was actually a sergeant with Nashville Police. And he said, "Hey, well, we're hiring." So I flew out, took the written test, took the little physical agility test, which was a joke. And
compared to the military stuff.
Yeah, it was a joke. So I did that, flew back to California. About a month or two later, they said, "Hey, come in for the Chiefs interview." So I flew back for the Chiefs interview, and the rest is history. And I started the academy in June of 2002. So I left California. I was actually still on terminal leave when I started the academy, and it was great for a while because I had 2 paychecks coming in. So yeah, that was really cool. But started the police academy in Nashville in June of 2002, and I hit the streets December of 2002 because it's a 6-month academy.
Daniel, I'm going to stop talking for a bit. Let you come in.
Okay. Well, I mean, tell us about. I mean, yeah, continue the story about joining Nashville PD. My brother lives out there, so I'm wondering about that whole organization.
That's cool. So, yeah, growing up, I always wanted to be a cop for 2 reasons. Miami Vice. Nice. I thought for sure, you couldn't tell me I wasn't Ricardo Tubbs.
You're the spitting image of Tubbs.
Back then I actually did have a Jerry curl. So
well, hold on. Do you have a picture of that?
Let's just say they got burnt in a fire. So and then the other was Lethal Weapon, because I thought Danny Glover was just the coolest role model. And I have a story about Danny, but we'll get to that. So I always wanted to be a cop. So that opportunity came up. Obviously I took it, and it was the best 5.5+ years of my life outside of the military. Because being a cop, people just assume all you're pulling people out of the car, you're beating people up, you're doing all this stuff. That's less than 1% of the job of being a police officer. The other part is meeting the people in the community and, being that role model to that little kid that's, without a dad or, is going through a lot of stuff. But yeah, best time of my life. I started in patrol. I went to a unit called Flex, which we kind of do high risk traffic stops, serve a lot of warrants, do that stuff. Then I went to narcotics for a while. We call it CSU, Crime Suppression Unit. I did that for a few months. I just got burnt out because you're dealing with like the crackheads and the prostitutes all the time.
Yeah.
And my ex-wife literally I would come home and she'd tell me, "You're being an asshole." And I didn't realize it because for 12 hours a day, I'm out buying dope. I'm dealing with the worst of the worst, got people pulling guns on me. So
yeah.
I ended up going back to patrol. So that's how I ended my career, was in patrol.
Dang. And even when you were doing these focused units, like narcotics, for example, was there still community involvement that you would get to do, or was most of your job just really dealing with dope and stuff?
Yeah, I was just dealing with dope because, when you get to that level, you use a lot of fake names. You kind of get the scruffy beard, and, people wouldn't know you're a cop unless, you show them your badge.
Or if they asked you, right?
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times, I would bust someone and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you're a cop." I'm like, "Yeah, that's the point. I'm undercover." I mean, I can remember one time where I thought, well, one of the many times I thought I was going to die. I was working narcotics. I happened to run to this store because I was thirsty. I'm in my unmarked, and it was on Gallatin Road, which is not the best part of Nashville. And there's a guy out there on his bike, and I just watched him do a hand-to-hand. So I was like, let me set this up. But my backup's not around, I'm just running in to get a drink. So I start talking to him. I'm like, "Yeah, I need an ounce of Ready." And if you don't know what Ready is, it's crack cocaine. So you hear,
I'm not hip to that, Vincent.
You're not hip to that.
Thanks for explaining that. Yeah.
So you have your powder, and then you have your rock, your crack, but on the street it was called ready. So I said, yeah, I need a ounce of ready. He's like, okay, yeah, I can get you an ounce. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. So he goes to shake my hand, and he pulls me in to like give me a hug. But of course, I'm wearing my bulletproof vest. I'm like, oh boy, I know he just felt that. I know he felt it. So he said, are you wearing a vest? I said, mm-hmm. Yeah. I said, all right, what am I going to say here? I said, yeah, motherfuckers out here are crazy. They'll shoot you. He said, yeah, man, I left mine at home today because it's too hot. And I'm just like, oh, thank God. Thank God. So, because I thought for sure he was going to say, dude, you're a cop.
Yeah,
right?
gotta be.
So, and then here's the kicker. Like 20 minutes later, I come back with my backup with the buy money. Sure enough, he serves me an ounce and we arrest him. And I'm like, dude, did you really buy the whole story about me wearing my vest? Because he's like, yeah, it's okay. So we go to court. His mom is there. His wife's there. And his mom's like the sweetest person in the world. His wife is. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing selling this stuff? And his mom's like, I've been trying to tell him to stop forever. I'm like, dude, like you got a mom who cares about you, your wife, and you're just out here, wasting your life away. But, the fun part of the job,
And it was like, and psychologically separating that was difficult.
Oh yeah. Because I mean, you have to put yourself in a mindset to think like a bad guy, and I think you have to put yourself there just so you don't go crazy. Even like, and I hate to say this, but if you pick up a prostitute, especially a street prostitute, that's a smell I still can picture in my head. I can still smell it because for some reason they all smell the same. I know that sounds weird, and unless you've done the job, it's not going to make sense, but it's a smell like they literally all smell the same. And for instance, I can remember smelling my first dead body. I know it's graphic, but there's certain things when you're doing that job that you don't ever forget. Like I can remember seeing my first dead body. I can remember the first time someone pulled a gun on me. I can remember what pure powder cocaine smells like. I can remember what fresh blood smells like. It's just, that's the stuff in the job that they don't prepare you for. But if you don't get there mentally, then you're not going to make it on that job. So.
Wow. And how long did you say you were in narcotics for?
I did that for, I want to say about 6 months, maybe. And then, like I said, I just got burnt out. It was just like, yeah, this is way too much. So
I don't know how anybody does it 2 months.
Yeah. And I know guys that are still doing it. I'm like, yeah, you're better than me, man. So.
Wow. And so patrol is that what you think of, like the beat type thing where you have an area that you are patrol?
Yeah. So most of my career I was in East Nashville.
East Nasty.
Yeah. He's nasty. There you go. So, the Gallatin Roads, the Dickerson Pikes, everything in between. Of course, now East Nashville's kind of blossomed and, been cleaned up, but I can remember running through the projects of East Nashville, chasing bad guys, having guns pointed at me, chased a ton of stolen cars. True story, one night I caught 4 stolen cars in one shift. It was like I'd stop one, take him to jail, come back like, oh, here's another one. So true story.
Could you just tell if a car was stolen by the way someone was driving it?
No, well, once they get reported, they go into NCIC, and then we had what we called a hot sheet, like every roll call, which is where you get your instructions for the night and all that stuff. I'd print out the hot sheet, and to this day, if I see a license plate, I'm like, oh, I know that license plate, John William Mary 325. And so I would just have the hot sheet with me, and I'd say, oh, I think that's on the hot sheet. And it is on the hot sheet, So like, oh, let me go after it. The funniest stolen car I ever got. Oh, it wasn't funny, but it wasn't, but it was. So there was this hotel called Apple Annie's on Dickerson Road. I don't even know if it's still there. but that was known for prostitution, crack, and a lot of cars we get stolen or end up there reported stolen because they were mostly rock rentals, where someone who's got a habit of crack cocaine would let someone borrow their car to go get crack, and then they would never report it, or they would never come back. So then they would report the car stolen. So we called it rock rentals. So there was this truck at Apple Annie's one time, reported stolen. So I checked myself out so I wouldn't get called. And I just sat on it. Yeah, I was working midnight, so it wasn't like there was a lot going on. So finally the truck starts, I see a guy come out, get in the truck, starts to move. I'm like, great, here we go. It's going to be a pursuit. It's 2 a.m. Yeah, let's go. So hit my blue lights, pulls right over. Like, all right, surely he's going to get out and run. Nope, just sits there. I'm like, man, all right, this is weird. So, I do the felony stop on it, spotlight, got my gun drawn, get out of the car, walk back to me, get on your knees, cuff this guy up. And he looks like, what's the guy that played Richie Cunningham? What's his name?
Ron Howard.
Yeah, Ron Howard. So, but with hair. So I'm like, all right, well, this is like really weird. This is way too easy. So put him in the backseat of the car, get in the front seat. And I said, hey man, you're in a stolen truck. He's like, yeah, I know. I'm like, man, this has never been this easy. He said, so yeah, I got to tell you something. Yeah, what? He said, so I escaped from a life sentence for murder like 2 years ago. And you're probably going to find that out. And I'm like, yeah, sure, dude. Yeah, right. Like who admits to that, right? And sure enough, I run his name and I'm like, holy crap, you did escape from prison for murder. Whoa. And I said, well, why'd you stop so easy? He said, honestly, man, he said, this outside life's not for me. Because he had been in prison for like 25 years. So that's all he knew.
He was institutionalized. He was Morgan Freeman from Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, he said, that's all I know. He said, at least in prison, I had 3 meals a day. I didn't have to worry about finding a job. I had a bed. He's like, now, I'm out here struggling, blah, blah, blah. It's like, all right, cool. Like, he was like the coolest guy I've ever arrested. And he literally had escaped a life sentence, Yeah.
Wow.
I got so many stories that people tell me I should write a book, like funny stories. Like one time I got in a pursuit. Of course, the passenger jumps out at like 60 miles an hour. I'm pretty sure he broke his leg. Oh. And we pull into an apartment complex, and the car just keeps going around in a circle. And I'm like, I know this guy's going to bail any second now. I know he's going to bail. And in Nashville, I literally only lost 1 foot chase ever in my career. And that's because I went in the backyard and there were 3 pit bulls, and I was like, you can have it. Go ahead. Right? So this guy's just going around in a circle. And finally that door opens up. I'm like, all right, here we go. Foot chase. The guy gets out, and I swear to God, he was about 600 pounds. So I look at him and I said, well, clearly this guy's not going to try to outrun me. And he looks back at me and he starts taking off. And I'm just standing there like dumbfounded, like, is he really serious? Right? So he gets about 20 feet and he just goes, and I said, dude, are you done? Like, are you done? So I walk up to him. He was so big, I had to use 2 pair of handcuffs.
Oh, man.
I said, man, did you really think you were going to get away from me? Man, I had to try. I know I'm going to prison. I had to try. It's like, all right, dude, I'll give you an A for effort.
Wow.
But not really thinking through what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah, what the outcome was going to be. Like, I mean, when you talk about in shape, I was really in shape in my police days. Yeah.
So what led you to leave the police force?
Yeah, so 2006, I want to say it was, my second wife, my son's mom, again, her dad was a cop in Nashville, and she and I started having issues. Then my daughter was coming to live with us. So about 2 weeks before my daughter came, my ex-wife decided to move out. And, looking back at it, she was doing her own thing that she didn't want me to find out about. But that's neither here nor there, whatever. That was years ago. So, you know, being a single dad raising a 10-year-old daughter, especially the shift I was working 3 to 11, like A, I never saw my daughter, and B, when I would come home, you know, at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, she's wide awake with every light on in the house. So, you know, it's just like, well, it's time to go be dad and instead of, you know, Officer Hill. So
Yeah.
that's what I did. I resigned and, you know, haven't looked back since. I still missed the job, but, you know, except for with everything going on right now. So,
Yeah. So I know you and I don't, we aren't prone to being political, especially while we're being recorded. But so tell us what your thoughts are on the path ahead for policing in big cities, small, dense, sparsely populated counties, the whole nine. How should the world be thinking about policing these days?
My opinion, they should be scared, you know, because this election season, you know, we heard terms like defund the police. You know, first of all, I don't know anyone that would want to live in a society where there's not police, right? You know, we hear things like police reform, you know, and let me preface it by saying, have I agreed with everything I've seen a police officer do? Absolutely not. Like, take George Floyd, for instance. You know, when you have your knee on someone's neck and he's telling you can't breathe, I mean, that's a technique that hasn't been used in 25 years. Do I think it had to do with race? Probably not. I think that guy, that cop, Chauvin, was just an asshole. I think he would have done that with anyone. But on the flip side to that, you know, when you hear names like Joshua Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, or Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, when me as a cop who's done the job and as a black man, I always tell people compliance equals safety. You know, when people want to say, you know, Blake's name in Kenosha, Wisconsin, well, let's back up and see what he did. His girlfriend, or whoever she was, called because he was violating order of protection. She called 911. In the 911 call, she says he's going to kidnap the kids. Inside the car are the kids. Also inside that car is a knife that he was reaching for when he was shot. Had you not done that, had you not reached for that knife, you'd still, well, he didn't die, but you wouldn't be shot. You know what I mean? So it's easy to say, oh, it was racial because it was a white cop and a black guy. Well, first of all, for names like Michael Brown and Tamir Rice and all these black names that we've heard in the media, I can tell you a white person that was shot the exact same way by police, by white police officers, but you never hear about because it doesn't fit the narrative that we've been sucked into believing. You know, policing, contrary to what people believe, has nothing to do with race. Now, again, is there racism? Absolutely. We'd be foolish to say there isn't. But as a cop, I don't get the option if my radio goes off and it says armed robbery in progress, blah, blah, blah. Suspect is a black male wearing a red shirt and blue jeans and orange shoes. I don't get the option as a white officer to say, I'm not going because he's a black guy. I have to go, right?
Right.
And when you look at demographics, most of your cities, the majority of your police officers are white. It's a fact, you know, unless you're in a city like Atlanta, where, you know, you have a larger number of black officers than in most other cities. You know, it's demographics, and police go to where crime is. So if crime's being reported or called in different neighborhoods, police have to go, and they don't have the option to say, well, I'm not going to pull the trigger because you're black. They have split seconds to make these decisions. So it's easy to say, yeah, I watched a 20-second video and it's all racial. Well, no, it's not. Like Alton Sterling, for example, in Baton Rouge. What happened? Store owner called, said, hey, this guy's selling CDs out here. I asked him to leave. He pulled a gun on me. So when police show up, oh, what's he wearing? He's wearing this. Well, they know it's him, right? And you can hear the cop, even on the cell phone video, saying gun, gun, gun. And when you slow the video down, You see the gun in his pocket. So it had nothing to do with race. I can't say I would have acted any different, like Tamir Rice, the kid in I want to say Cleveland, Ohio. I know it was Ohio that got shot with a toy gun. I honestly can't say I would have acted any different. Now, are there tactics that those cops could have done differently to protect themselves, right? Yes, absolutely. But when you rewind it 10 minutes before, when the guy called in and said, there's a kid in here pointing a gun at people, I think it could be a toy. A, you don't know that. Just because this guy says it's a toy, you don't know it's a toy. And B, he was pointing the gun at people. So it easily could have been someone else shooting him versus the cops because of his actions. And when you see Tamir Rice reach down into his waistband, now, granted, that kid was probably going to say, oh, it's just a toy. Let me show you. But what were the cops responding to? A kid with a gun pointing it at people. So when they reach for the waistband, cops did exactly what they're trained to do, right? You have to eliminate the threat. So it's like when people say, shoot him in the leg, that's great. I can shoot him in the leg. Two things are going to happen. He's going to bleed out because I hit him in his femoral artery, or he can still shoot me. He can still stab me. I've seen people shot center mass that were still able to shoot, still able to stab a police officer. So I think part of the problem is people don't understand what police officers, A, are legally allowed to do by law. Again, it has nothing to do with race. And then B, let's say, and I'll go back to Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Let's say the cop just said, all right, I'm going to let him go. He's a black guy. I don't want to be on the news. And then he would have taken off with the kids in the back seat, doing 100 miles an hour. He hits like a family crossing the street, then wrecks. The kid gets ejected from the car. The kid dies instantly. Who are they going to blame? They're going to blame the cop for not doing his job,
Right.
which is to protect and serve. So there's so much that goes into policing that people don't understand. Like, oh, in the movie, they shot him in the arm and he fell to the ground and he gave up. Or, they pepper sprayed him and he gave up, or they tased him and he gave up. I can show you 100 real life videos where people were tased and they just look at you like, yeah, that's all you got. I can, from personal experience, tell you I pepper sprayed someone right in their eye and they just look at you like, that didn't do anything to me. So, instead of saying words like police reform and defund the police, what we need to be saying is, all right, this is what police are allowed to do. But the bigger issue is no one's saying, well, we need crime reform. Because now I think what we've done is we've opened up for certain groups, certain demographics to say, well, I can do this, this, and this. But if a police officer touches me, then all I got to do is say it's racism. And now I'm a victim. Well, what about your victims of these crimes you've been doing? Like, now we're supposed to forget that. Like, and I hate to go back to Blake. Well, what about his girlfriend he was violating that order of protection, who he said he was going to kill? What about the kids he was going to kidnap? I can do whatever I want, but if a police officer touches me, especially one that's white and I'm black, I can just say racism and now I'm a victim. And everyone's going to, say, yeah, you're a victim. And this racism that, goes on, and it's funny, and I'll get in politics just a little bit. It's funny that it only happened starting in 2016 because, well, it started before that. And we kind of got groomed into that cycle because we started hearing things like the world should feel the pain of Alton Sterling, okay. He had a gun, and if he hadn't resisted, he'd be alive today, right? So, and then it became easy, in 2016, 2017 to say, oh, it's racism. And, they probably voted for Trump and that's why they're acting like this. I mean, it just became this stupid, movement to say all cops are bad, which again, policing has nothing to do with race. It has to do with numbers. It has to do with where I'm called. When I was in Milwaukee, when I was patrolling, I never patrolled in Brentwood. You know why? We never got any calls in Brentwood, right?
Right.
We never got any calls in Brentwood. So it's not like we had a heavy police presence there. But I guarantee we got a lot of calls in East Nashville at James Casey Holmes Projects or, Settle Court or something like that. Yeah. So there was a heavy officer presence. So yeah, we can say police reform, defund the police, all that we want. But if you notice in the last several months, especially since George Floyd, your crime rates have just started to do a serious uptick in a lot of these major cities. Because what you're seeing now is, there's a lot of police officers that are just like, nah, I'm done. I don't need this. You got police chiefs retiring, you got officers retiring. And that's not anywhere I would want to live personally. Like, I don't want that, because it's kind of danged if you do, danged if you don't. Because like I said, you let that bad guy go, he gets away running from you, he kills 5 people, you're still responsible because your job failed because you didn't protect and serve. But if you use force that you had to do to keep that guy from going and killing 5 people or doing whatever, then you're still the bad guy because, now you're a racist. Yeah. But again, I can tell you case by case where people have been killed by police you never heard of because it doesn't fit the narrative. So society has been tricked and trapped into, it only happens in the Black community. It only happens here. I talked to a guy named Dylan Taylor's family personally. He was killed 3 days after Michael Brown in Ferguson, which we heard for years, Michael Brown. Dylan Taylor, unarmed white kid, 19 years old, shot and killed, shot 3 times center mass by a white officer. Never heard of it. So it happens everywhere, but society has been tricked to believe, it only happens in the Black community, and it only happens when it's a white officer and a Black person. So therefore, America's racist. Again, does racism exist? Absolutely. But can you tie racism to everything that happens with the police? No, you can't. It's impossible. It's situational. Every situation is different. I pulled my gun on Black people, white people, Hispanic, Asian. I've had to lay my hands on Black people, white people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's situational. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with your interaction with that officer at that moment. If I tell you to put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest, and you do that, click, boom, we're done. But if you resist my arrest, the law says I can escalate my use of force. And if you escalate yours, I can do this and I can do this up to deadly force. So, situation.
It seems like a no-win job at times. And I know the scenarios we're talking about, they don't happen every hour of every day.
Right.
And I'd like to think they don't happen every day for police officers. I know there's some really tough parts of the country where it does seem to happen. Those encounters seem to happen a fair amount. But they don't make enough money. They're not given enough time to train to become even more proficient in those deadly or potentially deadly scenarios. And so I don't know how anybody becomes a police officer. I really don't, Vincent.
I wouldn't say it's the training because our academy was 6 months and then we had in-service every year and there's constant training. And I always tell people this, here's a prime example, Paul. If you're on the battlefield, you see the enemy 300 yards away, you know he's coming at you. You know he's coming. You got to get on that radio with that battalion commander. Hey, enemy's coming. I know he's probably going to blow us up. He's probably going to shoot us. What do you want me to do? And you may not hear anything back from your battalion commander immediately. Oh, how close is he now? Well, he's 100 yards away. All right, stand by. On the street, you don't have the opportunity to get on the radio. Hey, Sarge, there's a guy with a knife about 20 feet away from me. What do you want me to do? It's split second.
It's you or you and your partner. That's right.
Right. Yeah. It's split second. So you don't have, the training is there because everything is muscle memory when it comes to training for police. But you can't associate training with, it went from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah. My only point around training was I think there's some police departments that are not funded enough to be able to have the time to train. Or to be staffed in a way that allows them to do their operational jobs each day and have some of the police officers being trained.
Yeah, to be staffed for sure. Yeah. And it goes back to that movement of, hey, let's defund the police. And, I think initially when that term came out, people were saying, oh, we should divert more money to mental health training and this, which I'm totally in agreement with, because part of the job of being a police officer, everyone wants you to be your mental health counselor, your babysitter, your marriage counselor. I've been on those calls where I would get to a domestic and it was really just an argument because the husband said the wife was fat. And I'm like, why did you call the police? This is not a police issue, or I've been to the calls where, well, my son's not listening. I'm like, well, spank him.
I should have called the cops tonight.
Yeah. 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 So I'm like, well, spank them, So yeah, I'm totally in agreement with, hey, let's divert some money for mental health training, mental health resources. Yeah, absolutely. Like Charlotte is a prime example. They have officers that are trained to deal with mental health. And mental health is so hard to identify, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Mental health and someone being on crack or LSD or something, they have the same signs and symptoms. So as a cop, you don't know if this person is high, you don't know if they're mentally ill, but at the end of the day, their pain threshold is identical. So if you spray them with pepper spray or a taser, it's going to be ineffective. And then, that person ends up dying or whatever. And then the family's like, oh, he had mental health. They should have known. Well, not really. Because those signs and symptoms are almost identical. And B, mental health doesn't trump officer safety. So even if that person is mentally ill, if they're coming at you with a knife or trying to take your life, you have a duty and a right to protect yourself. So one doesn't trump the other. But yeah, I'm all for mental health training and community service and community policing. But I think the bigger issue still is you have to say, all right, society, you need to hold yourself accountable. You can't have a guy that's going out robbing and stealing and killing and doing whatever he wants to do, and you not say anything about that. You don't know his name until a police officer had to use force against him, right? Like nobody knew who Alton Sterling was until he was killed by Baton Rouge police.
Man.
But the only people that knew his name were his victims, like the girl he sexually assaulted, all those robberies he did. So we got to have accountability in the society to say, hey, your actions were wrong. This is why police showed up. Otherwise, we'll always be where, oh, well, it was a racist cop who did what he did, like.
Yeah, the good news is good policing, good law enforcement, the legal system functioning properly. All of that is very quiet and represents over 90% of the cases. What we end up having put in our faces through social media and corporate media ends up being a lot of really bad exceptions or sensationalized.
I would say really the only two bad exceptions, well, three bad exceptions, George Floyd, Walter Scott in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
And the guy in New York, Eric Gardner.
Yep.
All of those could have been prevented, especially Walter Scott. I mean, the guy's running away, you shoot him in the back, and then, oh, he had my taser, So those three cases, I would say those officers were totally wrong. But I would say probably 99% of what you see, if you know policing and you know the job and you know the law, the officer did nothing wrong. Yeah. Does it look bad when you're watching the 45-second video? Yeah.
Yeah.
And does it make the networks millions of dollars to keep showing this? Yeah. Does it make guys like Benjamin Crump and Al Sharpton millions of dollars when they show up to these cities? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that cop was wrong in his action, so.
Cool. Well, so I love your perspective, Vincent. It comes out of real experience and hardship, frankly, because being a police officer for a year and a half or 5.5 years or 25 years, it's a really tough thing. So I appreciate your service in the as a police officer. Also appreciate your military service. Let's move to how you got involved in the Steve McNair story.
Yeah, so of course, for those that don't know, Steve McNair was NFL player, quarterback for the Tennessee Titans and Baltimore Ravens. I think he retired as a Raven, actually.
He did. Yep.
But he always lived in Nashville. So Steve was killed July 4th, 2009. Godly, and I remember that day like it was yesterday. Like I can tell you where I was when I heard it and everything from that day. So, by later that night, they said it was a murder-suicide. And there was this 20-year-old girl in the condo with them, and she supposedly shot Steve once in each temple, twice in the chest, and then killed herself. And, just never really set right with me. Someone that supposedly bought a gun just hours before would automatically turn into this, Gambino crime mob.
Hired killer.
Yeah, this Gambino crime mob, killer, and then, kill herself. So I started, just investigating that case. Well, before that, I just really started speaking out about it, on the local TV there in Nashville, WIS, which led to some appearances on Dateline NBC. And after the first one, I wrote a book about it because, TV, they'll edit, just the parts they want. So I ended up writing a book called Playbook to a Murder. And after that, I ended up writing a second book, but did a podcast with Sports Illustrated. I think it was a 10-part episode podcast about it. But, if you look at that case and if you look at it on the surface, yeah, murder, suicide. Yep. This little girl, she was so distraught, so she killed Steve. But the narrative was she was worried about money and worried about being arrested for DUI like 2 days before. So she just snapped and killed Steve. Well, in theory, if I was dating Oprah Winfrey or Halle Berry or, somebody with that financial clout, the last thing you would ever hear me say is I'm worried about money, because I'm dating a multimillionaire,
Right.
I'm taking trips here and there. I just got a Cadillac Escalade bought for me. Like, I'm not worried about anything at 20 years old, when I'm dating a multimillionaire and when I'm also sleeping with other NFL players that I'm getting money from. So the whole thing just never made sense. And, the more I dug, there's no doubt in my mind Steve was the intended target. She just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But anybody that believes that's a murder-suicide, I would challenge you to just look at the facts and look at everything that happened in the months and weeks leading up to that murder, and you'll see it's not a murder-suicide.
So, briefly, who do you think did it and why? What was the motive?
I mean, me personally, I think the guy who claims he sold the gun did it. It was his gun for 2 years, but and I say that for several reasons. When cops went to talk to him, he never thought that gun would tie to him because he was a convicted felon who had already been in prison for murder and armed robbery. So when they went to talk to him, he lied right off the bat. If you have nothing to hide, you're not going to lie. When he gave his alibi to where he claimed he was, when Charles and Norris went to talk to that guy, they said, nah, he wasn't here, and he even told them, well, I went to his house at 12:30 and I was there until about 2:30, which is kind of the time frame of the murders. So once his alibi was shot, I mean, who else could it have been? Plus, he was the last person to call her. And when you listen to his recorded interviews, they're asking him about all these calls, and I have her phone records. They're asking him about all these calls that day, and he's like, oh, I don't remember. I don't remember what we talked about. I don't remember. And they say, well, when you called her at 12:02, how long did you talk? And he said, 3 minutes. And guess what the phone bill says? 3 minutes. So you can't remember any of those phone calls, those texts that entire day. But that when you called her at 12:02, you talked for 3 minutes on the dot. And I think that was because he was setting his alibi. He was waiting for that phone to ping wherever he was so he could leave that phone. Because that's one thing they went back and said, well, we checked his phone records. And after that call, his phone stayed in Smyrna. I'm like, well, no crap. Because everyone knows Even 2009, everyone knew your cell phones are walking GPS.
Right.
So that should have been like red flag number one. Like, oh, you can't remember all these calls, but you remember you talked to her for 3 minutes at 12:02, long enough for that phone to ping. You leave your phone, you go through the murders, then you come back. It's like, and he even told police, yeah, well, she told me where she was, but I didn't want to go down there. So he knew she was at the condo, which he claims he had never gone to. He's the last person to call her. It's his gun found at the crime scene, even though it's not in his name. And ironically, if the story is true and he sold the gun, first the gun sale happened on Friday, but once they figured, oh, that's wrong, or Thursday, once they figured that was wrong to fit their narrative, they said, oh, let's change it to Friday. And you're listening to his recorded interview. He never said Friday. They kept feeding him Friday. Because you can hear them say, so when you sold the gun, this was Friday, right? Friday. I don't know what day it was. This was Friday, right? Friday at 6:30. Yeah, I guess so. Friday. Like they kept feeding him Friday. So, all right, if that story's true, a few things would have happened. And for anything, just to shut me the hell up. There would have been video at Dave & Buster's of him pulling up in his car Friday at 6 o'clock, like he said, even though she was on the phone with Steve McNair at 6 o'clock on the dot while she's supposedly buying this gun from this guy. Yeah. I'm like, hey, honey, what are you doing? I'm buying a gun because, I'm going to kill you later tonight. All right. So there would have been video of him pulling up. There would have been video from inside Dave & Buster's, outside Dave & Buster's, of her walking to his car, getting in the car, driving around, her getting out, and then her going back in. That video doesn't exist. And then secondly, if she was homicidal and suicidal, why is his DNA, Adrian Gilliam's, nowhere on that gun? If I sold you the gun, I'm not going to sit there and, oh, I got to wipe my DNA off. You know what I mean? Like his DNA should have been all over that gun, like somewhere on that gun, right? If she just bought it at 6 o'clock Friday night, and then at 1:30 Saturday morning, she's using it to still kill Steve. His DNA should have been all over it, right? But it wasn't because he wiped it down. Because she's not going to be thinking, oh, I need to wipe this gun down. Because, once I kill myself, I don't want anybody else's, DNA to be on it. So, and the biggest thing with this whole thing, she wasn't even supposed to see Steve that night. Her friend Lucretia, who Nashville Police talked to and I talked to, they were supposed to hang out from Friday night till Monday morning because it was 4th of July weekend. Lucretia got stuck in Memphis. So she called Sahel at 9:30, said, hey girl, I'm stuck in Memphis. Sorry, I can't make it. You look at her phone records, you can see that call coming in. So during that call, Lucretia says, well, she said, I'll just reach out to Steve and see what Steve wants to do. All right. Now, keep in mind, she supposedly bought the gun at 6 o'clock. She hadn't planned on seeing Steve. So at 10:15, she texts Steve, hey, do you want to go have drinks? Again, still no solid plans to see Steve. Steve replies like, oh, the boys are still up. Talk to you later. It's like, okay. So at 11, whenever she gets off, she says, well, I'm going home and then to the condo. Again, no solid plans to see Steve. So how do you tell me you premeditated a murder? You buy a gun at 6 o'clock to kill a guy that you weren't going to see for a whole week because Steve was doing Mississippi on Monday to start the police academy. So you premeditated a murder. It had to be that night, but you weren't even going to see that guy that night. Like, come on. Yeah, like you had no plans to even see him. And then you kill him while you're in a freaking bra and panties. Like, what that was when Steve texted her at 1:30 and said, I'm on the way, and she's in a bra and panties. Come on. Like, we've all been there. That was a booty call at 1:30 in the morning.
Oh, absolutely. So what was the motive?
I think it was, I think there's probably some more hands involved, but I truly believe she owed Gilliam money. Because Gilliam, even though he doesn't want to admit it, was a weed man. And if you look at some of their texts and calls, because Gilliam, was like, oh, I was just trying to get with her. I thought she was cute. But Gilliam was living with his fiance at the time. They're now married. But there's like text and calls at like 1, 2 in the morning. Like, I used to work narcotics. I know what those calls are. Hey, I need to re-up. I need some more dope. Like, right.
Yeah.
And on that day, there were like 40 something calls and texts between the two, that Friday, July 3rd. So I'm thinking she either owed him money or there was something going on that day that ended up with them being killed, and the fact that, and it goes back to this, like, all right, she wanted to kill Steve. Fine, that's great. But why was Steve's 9mm Glock inside that condo? She never would have even had to involve this guy, Adrian Gilliam, who he claims he didn't know her, to get a gun to kill Steve. Steve's gun is right there. She could have waited for him to go to sleep, got the gun, pow, pow,
Yeah.
And what 19, 20-year-old girl puts one in each temple and twice in the chest? That's unheard of.
If she's
Now,
hysterical, she's not doing it. Yeah.
right. And, and let's just say she pulls the trigger the first time and doesn't go off. Then what? She's
done.
She's just supposedly got this gun 6 hours ago. She's not going to know to drop the magazine, rack the slide. Right. She's not going to know any of that. She's, oh God, what do I do? What do I do? Like, if they would have said Steve was stabbed 25 times and then she slit her wrist, oh yeah, she did that. Yep. No doubt in my mind, but to sit here and try to convince me that a 20-year-old girl that's 90 pounds soaking wet had the wherewithal to, well, I'm going to stand to his left side. I'm going to shoot him in his left temple. Then I'm going to stand in front of him, put 2 center mass with a shot group like yay big. Then I'm going to shoot him in his right temple. Then I'm going to shoot myself.
No one's ever done that in the history of mankind.
Thank you.
Well, it doesn't sound like an act of passion or an act of passionate rage.
Right, exactly. And that's what, Nashville police kept saying it was a crime. She was outraged about a DUI. Well, she only spent an hour in jail, and if you go back and see, again, it goes back to narrative. And me being a news guy, I know how to paint a narrative. It goes back to narrative, right? So you go back and watch when this first happened, they pulled up the parts of the video from her DUI arrest in the back of the car. And the only thing they kept playing was where she's like, I'm scared, right? But if you watch the entire time from the time she's in the back of the car to the time she goes to jail, Sean Taylor, who's no longer with the department, arrested her. He arrested her because he saw that truck 2 weeks before and he knew it was registered in Steve's name as well. So he was hoping to get Steve for a third DUI. That's why he really stopped him. But when you go back and watch that tape, she's in the back seat joking with him the whole freaking time. So she's like, yeah, what's your name? Didn't you stop me like 2 weeks ago? Like, yeah, I did. What's your name? Sean. Oh, Sean, are you going to rape me? Ha 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 ha. I'm scared. So what they did for a narrative standpoint, let's just play this part right here where she looks like she's crying, but then she goes right back to joking like, oh, you just stopped me because it's Steve's truck and Steve, you don't like Steve. Steve doesn't like you, blah, blah, blah. So then when you watch her in jail, she's like laughing and joking and doing this girl's hair. Steve has her out in an hour and it's done. So you mean to tell me like I'm going to go crazy and kill someone because I got a first time DUI that's going to get slapped down to reckless driving, and, oh, she was worried about money. Well, Steve had put $2,000 in her account that day, like clockwork, once a week. Because Lucretia told me, like, Steve would give her $2 or $3,000 a week, like clockwork. She's like, Steve gave me $5,000 one time when we went to Atlanta. So it's like, okay, your whole narrative of why she was, this lover scorn doesn't even make sense. You just got $2,000 that Friday. This DUI that's going to get knocked down to nothing. It's like, why would I kill myself?
Yeah,
Again,
why
if
would
I was
you
dating
get
Oprah? Like, I'm not worried about money. Like, hey, Oprah, I need $3,000. Like send me
you definitely
$3,000.
you wouldn't kill the golden goose,
No.
the other thing that's weird about it, so if this is all, it all sounds kind of, it doesn't make sense. So there's the question of motive
Mhm.
from this Adrian guy, but then like, why do you think the police department was so eager to, brush it off as a murder suicide?
The easy fix, right? Like, you don't want too much stuff coming out. It's Steve McNair. If it would have been Joe Johnson in East Nashville, it'd probably still be a cold case right now, right? But the easy fix is
They needed to solve it. They needed to have some answer.
Yeah, the easy fix is, well, there's Steve, there's this girl, there's a gun. All right, murder suicide. So let's just say Adrian Gilliam didn't leave the gun behind, or whoever didn't leave the gun behind. You got 2 murders, and just because there's a gun at the crime scene doesn't mean it's a murder suicide. Like it won't be the first time in history that a gun was left at the crime scene by the bad guy. You know what I mean? So, it was Steve McNair. It had to be solved quickly because, oh God, we don't want people talking about our star quarterback, and who happened to be married, by the way, and the condo's like 2 miles from his house. We got to solve this really quick. We don't want this coming back and staying in this city. So we got to solve it really quick. And then once they screwed up from day one, when they went to talk to Adrian Gilliam at his house in front of his fiance, instead of taking him to the police station, well, we're here to talk to you about a gun used to kill Steve McNair. They never said Steve McNair and Sahel Kazemi. Here's how I would have handled that. I would have picked him up, taken him to the police station, and I would have said, I got physical evidence tying you to 2 dead bodies. Start talking. I wouldn't have said anything about a gun or anything like that, because the minute they said that, especially in front of his fiance, they gave him every opportunity to build this lie. And again, if he had nothing to do with it, the minute he saw her picture on the news, if his story's true that he sold her the gun, he would have been calling police. Hey, I got something to tell you. Can I come down and talk to you? I sold that girl that gun like a couple of days ago. But he was banking on the fact that since the gun's not in my name because I'm a convicted felon, they're never going to trace it to me. So, but when they went to the guy who bought it from the pawn shop, he's like, I sold it to Gilliam, a year ago. So what they should have done from day one. All right, Adrian Gilliam, we got physical evidence tying you to 2 murders. Start talking. And just let them talk. Don't say a gun used to kill Steve McNair. Just start talking. Right? And then once his alibi didn't check out, they should have gone back and charged him with murder. But the problem is they couldn't, because his attorney was smart enough to have him sign a proffer. So he signs his proffer and he's like, yeah, I was at Tony Smith's house. And they go back and talk to Tony. And Tony said, he wasn't here. But by then it's too late. He's already signed his proffer agreement, So they screwed it up from the start.
Or they intentionally did it the way they wanted it to play out.
Yeah. Because I mean, what sounds better and what looks better, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Crazy. All right, well, let's move on to what you're doing these days, Vincent. When I reconnected with you a couple months ago, you said you were a news anchor out in Oklahoma. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, when I was there, I used to make appearances on like Fox and HLN and all that good stuff. So I hooked up with Dan Abrams, who used to do live PD. He has a trial network in New York. So I used to appear on there a lot. And, one day I said, hey, why don't you just let me host it? Let me anchor it. So started doing that once a week. I'd fly to New York, and I said, well.
Yeah, we were working together when you were doing that. Right?
I don't know. Was I going to New York then? I know I was doing a lot of the Fox and stuff. Maybe I was.
No, you had started going to New York. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I said, yeah, I kind of want to be a news anchor permanently. And I hooked up with an agent. I sent her a reel, and she told me I sucked. I was like, all right, cool. So
that's what everybody needs in their life. Somebody tells them they suck.
Yeah.
That's why I'm married.
Those weren't her exact words, but I mean, basically, so I said, all right, cool. I said, we'll talk again soon. So about 6 months later, I sent her another reel, and she's like, all right, now I'm ready to take you on as a client. So that was May of 2019, I think. Yeah, 2019. No, yeah, March, somewhere in there, March, April, May 2019. So by July of last year, I had this job here in Tulsa as weekend evening anchor for the local NBC here in Tulsa, KJRH. And I report 3 days a week. But, for this being my first news anchor job, I landed pretty well. Tulsa is a decent market when you look at demographics of news markets, right? Like, of course, everyone wants to be in the top two, which are New York and LA. But Tulsa is, I want to say 58. So to land in the top 50 of 150 plus, markets, it's pretty darn good. So my agent doesn't think I suck anymore. So,
Nice.
so that, that's a good thing. Yeah, but I love anchoring because it's different than reporting. Reporting's a beast in itself. You have to go chase a story and write the script and edit the video, and there's a whole bunch that goes into the 1.5 minutes people see on TV. That's like an all-day process, literally. But when you're anchoring, you actually get to like be inside people's living rooms, if that makes sense, and have a conversation with them. And I meet a lot of people here in Tulsa. They'll send me out and say, "Hey, you're Vince." I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Yeah, I watch you all the time. You don't come across as a news anchor. I feel like you're talking to me and not at me, but TV's changed in the last 20 years. You're not, this is Walter Cronkite with CBS News. That news telling is so outdated because people
Daniel doesn't know who you're talking about.
Oh God, okay.
No,
Yeah,
dude,
this
everybody
is true.
knows.
I forgot. Yeah.
Everybody knows Walter
But-
Cronkite.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But I think that style of news telling is, at least from an anchoring standpoint, is so old. You want that person where you're like, yeah, I could walk up to that guy at Walmart at the restaurant to say hello. And when it happens, people, when they do that, it's so cool and humbling at the same time. So I went from the Army to policing to fraud to being a news anchor. So yeah.
Do you think that news anchor is your that's your home, or do you think there's going to be another wild career change?
If the right opportunity comes along, I would get back in corporate America.
By the way, Vince, we skipped that because that's the most boring part of your life so far.
Yeah. But I love anchoring. I always tell people I want Lester Holt's job. I
Nice.
got probably years ago before that happens. But, I ideally when my contract is up here, unless I get like the main morning anchor or something like that here, I'm going to look for a main anchor job somewhere in a bigger market. There's a few jobs I was looking at in Columbia, South Carolina, which is where my parents are, of course. It's a smaller market, but they were main anchor jobs. So from a money standpoint, I'd probably be doing pretty good. Plus, it'd be cool to, be home again. It'd be a cool homecoming. But, ideally, again, New York and LA, it's where it's at, for a news anchor. But, anything can happen, I guess. We'll just have to see.
All right,
Yeah,
right
well,
on. Go ahead.
We look
Daniel.
forward to seeing you on the big screen.
Well, we'd
yeah.
have to move to Tulsa. Or I guess there's some stuff on the internet too,
Well,
right?
oh yeah, there is. In fact, speaking of Steve McNair, I'm actually flying to LA in like 2 weeks. The Vice Network is doing a special, I guess, about NFL, the dark side of the NFL. So they tracked me down and they want to do an episode about Steve. So
Oh wow.
it's like, sure, LA on your dime. Yeah.
Sure.
Hard to say
Sure.
no.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
Vincent, you're not a married man at the moment.
I am not. I've done that twice, man. So I
Yeah.
don't.
It's probably enough, maybe.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. I got the worst luck with that. So I think the long-term relationship is fine, but the M word just always goes like to shit for whatever reason.
Well, our Army and police officer doesn't equate to long-term anything.
Yeah, that, honestly, neither does news business. I know a lot of people that honestly, the divorce rate is so high in the news business. So is the alcohol rate. Because I equate it to policing though. You're always doing the worst of the worst for the most part. Like this year, It's been everything COVID. Every story we've done, just about, it's been COVID, or I broke down one time at a scene where these two kids were missing. They were 2 and 4, and they found them in the freaking creek. And as a reporter, I'm trying to keep my cool, but when the police chief said that, I literally had to walk away. Like I just broke down, and I had to call. And I was supposed to be live at 5 o'clock. It was like 4:15. I called my news director. I was like, "Hey, dude, I can't do it. Like I can't do it. So you do have that, divorce rate, the alcoholism in the news business, because you're just doing the worst of the worst. And we were a couple of months back, before we all had to not go in the station. We were just talking. We're like, how many of you guys have started drinking more? And like all of us, we start hating, because I always tell people, it's not the glitz and glamour that you think it is to be on TV. Like it's not, and then it's not like you just show up. It's not like I show up Saturday at 4:50 and I go sit in front of the anchor desk and I start reading the prompter. My day starts at 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot that you don't see. And it's just, it's a different beast. I tell people, and I say it jokingly, but I kind of mean it. Like, this is more stressful than chasing a bad guy that's pointing a gun at you, because it's just, for the most part, a lot of negativity that goes into it. And it's the most demanding thing ever, to meet a deadline, or you've been working on a story all day and it falls through at 3:55, but they still want you to have a story and be live in the 5 o'clock news. And you're like, what? So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Vincent, how old are your kids now?
My adults are 25 and 19.
Wow, man.
Yeah. So my daughter turned 25 on Halloween. She actually came to Tulsa the end of September, which was pretty cool. Her mom bought her a plane ticket out here, which I flipped out because she's never done that. And so I was like, "Is your mom okay? She sick? She dying? Like, what's going on?" Right? So I got to hang out with her, which is pretty cool. My son now is at Jackson College. He did not want to move to Tulsa from Atlanta, so he moved with his mom to Hillsdale, Michigan, and now he's hating life. But Hillsdale's a very small town, but he's in school, he's working, so he never. And Paul, you met my son a few times. He never gave me any problems, any real problems anyway. So I'm proud of them both. My daughter just finished medical billing and coding school, so
Cool.
Yeah, so proud of them both. But man.
And share their names for posterity, since this recording will be out there forever.
Alexia is my daughter, born on Halloween of 1995, Fort Drum, New York. And then, of course, my son is Vincent, but he's not a junior because his mom hated junior. So his birth certificate says the second.
that was maybe the first sign of trouble.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. The first sign of trouble is when her mom told me before we got married, you're probably too good for my daughter. I'm like, oh God, I should have listened.
Oh man,
I should have listened.
You maybe thought she was trying to be funny or cute or something, but she was being serious, maybe.
Yeah, she was being serious. Yeah, she was being serious. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, Vincent, I think you've got a lot more to tell us, but we're not going to put you through another hour and a half or so. But we really appreciate you joining us. I'm glad we caught you on, I think, what is effectively your Saturday.
It is my Saturday, yes.
Even though for us, 8 to 5 is Monday through Friday, it's our Thursday right now.
Yeah.
But really appreciate you joining. It was great seeing you again. Great catching up. And we'll definitely have you back on.
Thanks a bunch, Vincent.
If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe through whichever app you're using. To share your thoughts, head over to our website at podso1.io, and there you can comment on episodes or send us feedback directly. Thanks for listening.